It's the Draft Fellows coming at you live. Kyle and Andrew breaking down the drive. Prospects to roster, we got the flow. First round picks to the ones you don't know. Talk about the combine, skills on display. Who's rising up and who's falling away. Roster building like a GM in the zone. Kyle, Fellows, Andrew Mertig, they own the phone.
Hey, welcome back to the Draft Fellows podcast. I'm Andrew Mertig. That is Kyle Fellows, and together we are the Draft Fellows. Make sure you're checking us out on YouTube or, of course, your favorite audio podcasting platform. I don't know what I'm saying, Kyle. It's a Monday. How are you doing?
I am doing really, really well. This is a fun time of the year. We're right on that edge of the draft season. We're in wild card weekend. Right now, we're watching the end of wild card weekend as the Rams battle the Vikings on Monday Night Football in the playoffs. So it's a fun time. How are you doing?
Yeah, we were doing our show prep, and all of a sudden I looked down at the the score, and I was like, "What just happened?" It was 10-3. We talked for like 5 minutes, and all of a sudden it's 24-3 at halftime. Nuts.
It is crazy.
Yeah, it started out as a really like boring weekend. Home teams were winning. They're kind of blowing out teams. Of course, we're both Packers fans, so that one didn't.
Yeah, not super
that performance was not something that we really wanted to dwell on. But then you get the Sunday night game with the Commanders and Jaden Daniels just like skyrocket. Is he the best quarterback in the league right now?
Of all time, yeah.
But I mean, amazing. And so it's going to be really fun next weekend. You're going to get to see the Lamar-Josh Allen matchup. We're going to see how good the Chiefs are with that matchup against a Texans team that has a great defense and like a lot of question marks on offense. In the NFC, you get Jaden Daniels going 1-on-32 against the Detroit Lions. And probably it looks like the Rams and the Eagles on the other side, which should be a really, really fun matchup. So man, playoff football is cool.
Yeah, it is. Like you said, we're disappointed the Packers are out because that's our team, but there are a lot of good football teams that deserve to be going on to the next round, and it is really going to be fun to see. But like you said, really strange progression. A lot of these games started out tight, maybe a little bit more interesting than we thought. Like the Broncos early had a lead on the Bills. That did not hold. It looked for a second like these Vikings were going to make it interesting when it was 10-3. It looks like that's kind of gotten away from them. So some decisiveness, I would say, from the wild card weekend for sure.
Yeah, and I think like playoffs, it's great, but we're seeing the result of all of this offseason stuff that we get so excited about playing out right in front of us in the playoffs, whether that be Sam Darnold to the Vikings, which didn't seem like a very big deal at the time, or Jaden Daniels, of course, in the draft, or Saquon Barkley to the Eagles. All of these offseason moves that we obsess over, we talk about for months and months and months, and then finally you get to the playoffs and you're like, oh yeah, all of those things turned out to be really, really important after all.
Absolutely. I mean, even going further, Bo Nix, we kind of made fun of like, they just took the quarterback that was left. And like, I mean, even things like Puka Nacua being like this like late round pick that's now like kind of like just keeping that offense afloat in LA and those kinds of things. So it is an interesting conversation to watch the ebb and flow of the NFL and the way that the offseason does inform now the playoffs and who's going to take home the trophy at the end of the season.
Yeah, and nothing bigger than quarterback moves, right? Which is going to be our topic for today.
Absolutely. So I'm really excited to get into this. I was telling you pre-show, we've done a good amount of shows now with the Draft Fellows. This is probably my favorite show concept that we've put together. And I say we've put together. This is Andrew's baby. But I think that the conversation we're going to have today is really interesting, but also illuminating for how many really big, difficult decisions are ahead of some of these NFL teams. As, of course, like we know you cannot win in the NFL without a quarterback. We know there are only so many good ones, but there are a lot of teams, maybe even more than normal, who are going to be crossing that bridge of what is our future at the quarterback position in this particular offseason.
Yeah, and so we're going to jump into first talking about teams who need quarterbacks. And I think if you're watching on YouTube, you're seeing this list, and I feel like the teams that I've identified who need quarterbacks, probably not very controversial. We're talking about the New York Giants, Cleveland Browns, Las Vegas Raiders, New York Jets, and the Tennessee Titans. I don't think anybody would say those teams have quarterback figured out right now. The maybe column might be a little bit more controversial. And so I wanted to say, if I'm not 100% locked in certain on quarterback, I'm going to put him in this list. And then Kyle, you and I will go through this and figure out if it's actually somebody who needs a quarterback or if they should just stay with the status quo. And that is the Carolina Panthers, the Los Angeles Rams, the New Orleans Saints, the San Francisco 49ers, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Minnesota Vikings. So anything you want to talk about there? You want to jump right into our candidates?
No, I mean, this is a really interesting list because I think every team on that list, as you laid out, can make an argument that they have their guy, but just as easily you can say like no, or you're like you don't have your guy 2 years from now. So like this is a really it's a we know that the worst time to look for a quarterback is when you need a quarterback. So I think that that's what keeps all of these 6 teams in the discussion.
Yeah, and Carolina, San Francisco, and Minnesota fans are screaming at me right now, like, we have our quarterback. And yeah, you may be right, but I wanted to actually talk through all of these situations as we go as well. And so, this is always a very limited pool of who is available. And when we take a look at the draft, there's 2 players that get talked about in those top 2 to 5 picks pretty consistently, and that is Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback from Colorado, and Cam Ward, the quarterback from Miami. Now, you could say maybe Drew Allar from Penn State. I don't know what the draft status, if he's going to decide to return to school. If he is not, we're still kind of figuring that out. Is he somebody that through the college football playoff has shown that he can be one of these top-notch quarterbacks, or is he maybe a late first, day 2 kind of pick? We're still walking through that. So we know Sanders and Ward are going to be highly desirable. And then I also wanted to mention 2 potential cuts, some veterans. We could see Aaron Rodgers out in New York. This is kind of expected. And then Kirk Cousins in Atlanta. Whether or not there's a market for either of those 2 players, I'm not sure, but I would expect that both of them could be available, whether that's through cut or potentially a trade.
I love the Falcons in this situation that just keep saying the same thing through different, I don't know, like if it's like agents or like what, but it's like they just keep telling everyone we don't need to trade Kirk Cousins. Like, and we're like, no one is asking. Like, no one is like, no, this is not a problem. But they're like, we will keep him on the roster. And it's like they're trying to convince everybody that you're going to have to give us something for Kirk Cousins, which is just not realistic. Someone is going to basically offload a contract from the Falcons if that happens. But it seems like they're trying to convince teams around the league that he's available, but it's still going to cost something if they don't get the right deal, they'll keep him. But a fascinating situation developing there in Atlanta for sure.
Yeah, and then the free agents, it's really headlined by Sam Darnold, and then to a lesser extent Russell Wilson. Now, if this was 3 weeks ago, these names probably would have been like in bold, like big time free agents. Both of them have struggled a little bit down the stretch into the playoffs. Russell Wilson, of course, and the Steelers are done. Sam Darnold, it appears that way. We're only at halftime, but we will see. And so those decisions are going to be really interesting. And then if you're watching on YouTube, you're like, Andrew, use bigger font. But I had to fit this whole list in here of potential veteran free agents that are out there. Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Jacoby Brissett, Taylor Heineke, Marcus Mariota, Drew Lock, Andy Dalton, Justin Fields, Joe Flacco, Jameis Winston, Mac Jones, Jimmy Garoppolo, and Mason Rudolph. Whew, deep breath.
That's a good list.
It's a long list. I don't know if it's a good list, but every year we're going to see veterans that get signed and then end up playing because of injury. And we're also going to see some of these names as potential bridge quarterbacks for the rookies that are out there as well. And in just a few moments, you and I are going to try to play matchmaker on who is going to end up where. So that could be a potentially fun activity as well. But I did want to mention 4 other players. And these are players that are currently backup quarterbacks. Their teams have the solution at starter in front of them, but they could be potential trade candidates. Now, we don't see this happen very much in the NFL. I'm trying to remember the last backup who is traded to become a starter. Like, obviously, Matt Flynn is a very famous one. Drew Bledsoe became available when the Patriots found out Tom Brady was great, but
Yeah, it's been a bit.
I'm sure I'm missing it. Please leave it in the comments because, like, I'm obviously forgetting somebody. Matt Hasselbeck, Aaron Brooks. The Packers had a long line, like Mark Brunell, Ty Detmer. But trade candidates, and one, I think Cooper Rush for the Dallas Cowboys played really, really well down the stretch, and I would be interested to see if he would be made available by Dallas, and if there's a team that would be willing to go out and get him. Maybe Mike McCarthy ends up in New Orleans, for instance, and becomes interested in a Cooper Rush, having worked with him before. Tyson Bagent in Chicago. Now, he didn't play much this year, but in the preseason looked fantastic. He does have some starting experience going back to his rookie year. He was a UDFA, but somebody that the Bears were really, really high on as a potential backup there. Malik Willis for the Packers ended up shining after the trade from the Titans and could be somebody that somebody might be willing to take a flyer on. And then also Jake Browning from the Bengals, who played really well in 23 down the stretch in replacing an injured Joe Burrow. We haven't seen much of him this season, but certainly a backup that I think some teams might be interested. Maybe there's a connection there with Tennessee having his former offensive coordinator as the head coach.
Yeah, it's a really interesting group. It will be fascinating. Like, none of these names get you really excited, but we just went through the list of available players, and it's slim pickings. So, like, somebody's going to need – these guys are going to get jobs, and some of them may actually get an opportunity to play more than you might think. It always works out that way, but definitely an interesting list there available via trade.
All right, now we're going to play Matchmaker. So we're going to go through this team by team. I'm going to let you go first on most of them, maybe all, and then we'll talk about who we would take. So the first team up, I would imagine this is going to be a pretty quick conversation. Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, we have our list in front of us. We haven't talked through this yet to compare, but we have each other's lists, and I can see out of the gate we are going to have some similarities, but it will get pretty dicey as we get down into the exercise. Bryce Young, I think the Panthers are pretty committed to trying to make this work. It's kind of been a roller coaster ride, and like the psychology of Bryce Young, like, bless that young man, because of the way that it's just kind of been like, it's your job, it's not your job, you're terrible. Oh yeah, we need you again. And now you might be good. Like, we don't know. So that's just going to be fascinating to see how they surround him with talent to make this work. They thought they had something in place there with Jonathan Brooks that probably could have been a help. Doesn't look like that's going to be present in the immediate future. So what they'll do in the offseason to help him. But by all accounts, with the new coach, Dave Canellis, it feels like the vision here is we're going to try to make this work and make Bryce the future.
Yeah, I love the way he fought back after the benching. Really looked confident and comfortable down the stretch. Really, really excited to see what's in Bryce Young's future. Next up, we have the Los Angeles Rams, who, of course, have a quarterback, but we don't know if he's going to retire.
Yeah. Matthew Stafford is playing really well currently on TV as we speak, and so it's hard to see a player like that walking away, which seems like he's playing prime football right now. But he's getting up there in age. He's in his mid to approaching late 30s, and we know that there is an expiration date on all athletes, and he's in that realm right now. So I'm going to say that Matthew Stafford is back for one more season based on the way he's playing. But I do think that the Rams will look to the future the best they can. And so I'm going to say that they marry him up with a rookie. And I'm going to go with Jackson Dart here, the Ole Miss quarterback. This is a player that a lot of people in draft media are trying to say this guy could be the riser. There's some people who've inflated it a little bit lately, I think. But this is a player that maybe the Rams could get in a place where they feel comfortable. It's not like they're investing the first round pick maybe, but this is a guy who could start maybe 2-3 years down the road, and they have a little bit of time to develop. But some tools there to work with in someone like Jackson Dart. But I think it's a Stafford rookie combo for the Rams in 2025.
Yeah, so I also had Matthew Stafford. I was just taking a look at his age and some of the draft declarations that I might have missed over the last couple of days. Stafford turns 37 in a few weeks. So
37.
he's still like not that old. And I definitely think like the way he has played this season makes me think that he will be back. really re-energized as a super young team. They're going to start to get out of some of the cap problems that they have. Really have the ability. I also said Matthew Stafford and then a rookie to be drafted. Maybe if he does end up staying in the draft, somebody like Texas's Quinn Ewers, who probably goes like in the 3rd round ish, somebody who has a lot of upside but needs some coaching, and that's where Sean McVay and that staff, Mike LaFleur has done a phenomenal job there. Like they can bring along a young quarterback, so I really, really like that. How about the New Orleans Saints? Where you got them going?
Oh my goodness! So the Saints here are in an interesting situation. Obviously, we know that they are going to hire a new coach. We talked about Mike McCarthy seems to be a hot name there. That would be fascinating and great for Mike getting another job again in the NFL. Culture guy, right? And I feel like this is a time for the Saints where they're probably going to try to find that new identity. What is the next season for the New Orleans Saints? But is Derek Carr a part of that? Like, I think that's the conversation here. And interesting, he has a $51 million cap hit next year, Derek Carr. So moving on after 2025 makes a ton of sense because of the cap hit that he would require to release, unless they just feel like with a new coach coming in, they got to rip the Band-Aid off and do it right away just to kind of like start fresh, right? If they did that, they could post June 1st him and spread that cap hit of $51 million over 2 years, which is still a heck of a lot of money. But if, say, it's, I don't know, Spencer Rattler and another rookie, or like guys who aren't costing a lot, you could probably afford to get out from under that contract if you really, really needed to, and if you don't feel like Derek Carr is going to take you where you want to anyway. But the money is the problem with Derek Carr, and that's just going to be an internal conversation for them of like, does he take us where we want to go in 2025, or do we start that rebuild right now?
Yeah, I think you make a good point, but having done the simulation of the Saints offseason before, it's so difficult to find a way for them to get under the cap without restructuring Carr's money in any scenario, much less to have him on the roster to cut him for June 1st. So I'm with you. I have Derek Carr and Spencer Rattler as the quarterbacks just because I don't know how they can possibly move on from Carr at this point. So I think you just go forward with the guy you're stuck with and try to be excited about it, get your wide receivers back, and hope there's some chemistry there. How about the 49ers? Is there anything here? Are they bringing Purdy back?
I think they're bringing Purdy back. I don't know why they are having so much like kind of nuanced conversation about it. It feels like they're like kind of dancing. And I don't know if they're thinking like they don't like, obviously, like for us as Packers fans, the Packers had to pay Jordan Love top like market value, right? Like, and maybe the 49ers are nervous about paying market value, full 4 or 5 year contract for someone like Brock Purdy. But it feels like they're going to end up doing that. I don't see any other route to this unless they figure out a way to convince him that he's not in that upper echelon of quarterback, and he's convinced with that, or if he's comfortable with that. But it feels like this is going to be a decision that they make. He's going to be the signal caller there for a long time. It just doesn't feel like there's any real pivot outside of that, unless they want to get weird and do something like Kirk Cousins. But you're looking at like a 1-year Band-Aid, and it just doesn't feel like that's in the best interest of the 49ers.
Yeah, you and I have talked multiple times in the past. Like there is a team out there someday that is going to do this. They're going to ride with a rookie quarterback, and then when they get to their contract, even though they're good, they're going to move on and bring in the next rookie quarterback, and they're going to try to just put so much talent around this young signal caller that they're going to be able to succeed. And we had sort of joked, could this be the 49ers? And that's why they're on the list here. That, and everybody's sort of talking about like, are they going to re-sign Brock Purdy? But I think at the end of the day, you have to. Like, you just have to figure it out. And they have some money that's going to come off the books that is going to make it fine. I just worry about the supporting cast when Brock Purdy goes from having, the best supporting cast in the league a year ago to like next year, maybe that's not as good. So we'll see. We got the Pittsburgh Steelers up next. So Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, both free agents.
This is tough. This was the one that like made me think the most, probably, because the reality is like, I've seen a lot of people say like, hey, they're just going to go back to Justin Fields. And I'm like, they made that decision already. Like, they've told us what they think. And unless they blow the whole thing up because Steelers Nation is a mess right now, and like we're in fire Tomlin mode after the failure in the postseason again. Maybe that things get really weird, but in this current situation, with as long as they keep the current OC and Tomlin in place with Arthur Smith there, it feels like they made their decision about Justin Fields. So I think you kind of rule that out. Russ Wilson, I think they know where he's going to take them, and I think we saw that, and it certainly feels like there's a lot of tension between Russ Wilson and the wide receiver that I'm totally blanking on right now, George Pickens. There's a lot of tension there. So they've got a lot to navigate, but like we've talked, there's not a lot of other options. So it kind of feels like Russ Wilson maybe is back here. It's just kind of a Band-Aid. I'm going to say they go Russ Wilson. And then I think this is the weird one. Maybe they bring in someone like Jalen Milroe to kind of develop behind Russ Wilson. They're not going to, have a top pick in this draft to go get a guy who's ready to play right away. But they play in a division with Lamar Jackson. They've seen the guy who beats him with his legs all the time. Maybe that's a little bit intriguing to them to say, like, what if we got that next guy who we get a little bit later in the draft who's super athletic and can win in multiple ways? I don't know. I just think it'd be fascinating to see that happen there in Pittsburgh.
I absolutely love Jalen Milroe. I'm going to end up being higher on him than probably just about anyone in the draft industrial complex this offseason. Please don't let him go behind Russell Wilson, because he's going to end up getting forced into the lineup when people realize that Russ can't play anymore. And Milroe needs one, probably 2 seasons on the bench to learn. And I think he's going to be one of the younger players anyways. I think you're going to end up getting a phenomenal player if you give him that time to learn and develop. He's not there yet. And the upside's crazy. I have the Steelers going with a different veteran quarterback. This isn't going to be popular at all. Aaron Rodgers.
No.
So, yeah, I think Mike Tomlin probably is one of the few coaches who could really reel in Aaron Rodgers, make him play within the system, help him understand this isn't going to be your offense with your guys, but we want that veteran quarterback to come in. Just don't make mistakes. Distribute the ball around enough. This is a team that has all of the pieces except the quarterback. And I think, if they can add a little bit on the offensive line, Aaron Rodgers can be pretty good in handing off and getting the ball to where he needs to go. This would not be popular in Pittsburgh. I understand why. But I think this would be actually a really fun marriage between Mike Tomlin and Aaron Rodgers.
Well, if Aaron Rodgers finds the fountain of youth this offseason, which is not outside the realm of possibility given his track record of things, but given a couple of years, if he gets reinvigorated and says, hey, I want to play 2 more years, like maybe that's a long shot. He's getting real old, but like that might be a perfect scenario for someone like Jalen Milroe to get those years behind someone like that. But I think that I didn't laugh, but when I saw that name with the Steelers in your doc, it really caught me off guard. But then when you think about, like, if Rodgers wants to play, this is a historic organization who is still a playoff team that has talent, it has a defense, and an opportunity for him to come in. And he said a lot of things about Mike Tomlin in the past, really, really complimentary things. So there are a lot of things here that, after me kind of like brushing this off as like, we don't know what to do with Aaron Rodgers, like, maybe there's something here, and I think that could be really, really fascinating.
All right, we got the Vikings up next.
The Vikings. All right, so I am going to say that they're not opposed to Sam Darnold, but I think Sam Darnold, in this kind of drought of a quarterback situation in the NFL, is going to get an offer of a 2 to 3 year contract from a team to come in and be a starter. And I don't think that the Vikings are going to be willing to match that kind of energy. And so I think you're going to see him go somewhere else. So in my scenario, this is the JJ McCarthy show. They're going to give him the reins, but they also have Daniel Jones there. And I think that this is, obviously, we've seen Daniel Jones in New York, but Daniel Jones is not an untalented player. So I think that they could kind of put those things together and say, okay, if JJ's ready, we're ready to go with that. If we need to, see if Daniel Jones can give us a little bit this season as well, like, we're going to learn this, but I have a hard time thinking that they're going to look at their options and say, hey, we have a rookie contract quarterback and we have Sam Darnold, who right now is failing them in the postseason, and give him a really large contract. So I'm going to go Daniel Jones and J.J. McCarthy as a combo there.
Yeah, and I had Darnold and then J.J. McCarthy as the backup, and this is before the Vikings are getting throttled in their playoff game, coming off of getting throttled in Detroit. So maybe this isn't such a good look, but I wasn't going to change it at this point because it would change a lot of other things. I do think that at least there was motivation within the Vikings organization to reward Darnold for what he did. And if McCarthy just ends up like coming along a little bit more slowly, that's fine. Then he has next year to recover from the injury and still, learn. And if Darnold goes down, then you have a really quality backup. So I do think that there's a possibility there, but I think you're right. Maybe Darnold gets a huge offer on the open market. So how about the New York Giants?
Okay, so this is where things got fun for me, because I had this going very differently a little while ago, and then I was sitting and I was like, I think things are going to get weird. So the Tennessee Titans are sitting at 1 right now, and they are doing they've moved on from Rand Carthon as their GM, and it seems like they are just kind of like laying things out to go in a different direction. I think they think that they want to do things the right way. I don't know how that will work out, but I think they kind of want to slow things down, not pretend that they're gonna, catch lightning in a bottle and maybe just kind of start over from the ground up. So I'm gonna say that the Tennessee Titans are willing to sell the number 1 overall pick because they recognize that this is not a super strong quarterback class. So rather than like trying to make one of these guys into something they're not, they're gonna say, hey, we're not a quarterback away. We're gonna sell that pick to a team that is desperate for a quarterback in the New York Giants, sitting at number 3, had the opportunity to come and get Shedeur Sanders, who has the name, and they can bring him to New York, and he's the new brand for this New York Giants team. So I think they retained Drew Lock, who did some things for them that looked pretty impressive down the stretch, but then Shedeur Sanders with the number 1 overall pick after a trade up is the long-term answer there in New York.
Really interesting. And so in my projection, I had the Giants missing out on one of those top 2 quarterbacks and then having to settle on bringing Drew Lock back. So I also had that, and then making it an open quarterback competition with Kirk Cousins. So with the head coach and the GM coaching for their jobs, I went with the veteran option there. How about in Cleveland? Are they going to take a quarterback at 2?
Yeah, so in my scenario, then they're sitting at 2, and they will take the second quarterback off the board, who I, at this point, really, really early will anticipate ends up being my number 1 quarterback, and that's Cam Ward. I think that this is just the Browns saying we're done. We did something we regret, and we're going to move on and hand the keys over to rookie Cam Ward.
And then I also have Cam Ward going to Cleveland, and I have Jameis Winston returning as like the bridge quarterback. I think those two actually would be really fun too.
Yeah,
they have a lot in common play style wise. How about Las Vegas with the Raiders?
So the Raiders are where I have Sam Darnold landing. I think that this is an interesting spot because they're picking 6, right? They're, let me see, sitting at number 6 overall. That's probably a little bit out of range for a quarterback, unless a team like the Titans were willing to sell that pick like they did in my kind of like simulation. But that would mean that the Titans have to go all the way down to 6. It feels like there's going to be a team higher that's going to be willing to come up. So I just feel like they're going to be kind of stuck in no man's land. And I think that this is an opportunity. They might be the team who says, hey, we'll give you 2-3 years in a contract and really let you see if you can become an NFL starter again at this point in your career. Also, like, we know that Sam Darnold played out on the West Coast, in college, had a ton of success at USC. We're not that far removed from when he was the darling that everybody thought was going to be the next NFL superstar. So a return back out West makes a little bit of sense as well. So I like that landing spot for Sam Darnold.
Yeah, and I actually, I have something else, but I'm going to give you a little bit of credit there, because if Ben Johnson does end up in Las Vegas, which there are some rumors tying him to it, and Tom Brady wants to make an impact with that quarterback decision, I think Ben Johnson having a lot of success with Jared Goff, you can see the parallels with Sam Darnold all over the place there, right? High draft pedigree, kind of given up by his original team. and then finds his home there with hopefully the addition of some good young weapons. I didn't have Darnold leaving, and so I had to settle for the Wilson and Wilson duo. That is Russell Wilson and Zach Wilson.
Yikes.
And I think Zach Wilson's a potential reclamation project here. After a year with Sean McVay, I think he's somebody that a team could potentially get really excited about. I think for Las Vegas, that would be a bummer, but you surround him with enough weapons and maybe, you have an okay year and then look to get your quarterback in 2026. So now we move on to the New York Jets. What are they going to do post Aaron Rodgers?
So with the Jets, man, this was the other one that I was like, I don't know if I love it, but like the Jets have to do something. It's probably not going to be Aaron Rodgers. They are sitting at pick number 7. So again, it's going to be tough to in this quarterback class solve your problems at 7. The Jets are in a weird spot. Like they hypothetically are a really talented football team. They have an impatient owner who probably believes that if things had gone a little bit differently this year, maybe they still could have been a playoff team. Like they believe that they're a talented football team. So I'm going to say this is the Kirk Cousins landing spot. We know that when they were kind of courting Aaron Rodgers and the weirdness of that, Kirk Cousins was kind of the backup plan back in that conversation as well. So maybe those two find a way to dance again. Kirk Cousins gets another opportunity. But I'm going to also say the Jets are a little bit nervous because things haven't always worked out there. And they're going to bring in Quinn Ewers as a rookie to kind of be the plan in, say, 2 years after maybe a Kirk Cousins bridge.
Nice. With the Jets, this is the only one of those trade candidates that I mentioned from earlier that I had landing, and that is the Jets acquiring Tyson Bagent from the Chicago Bears, and him being the starter in front of free agent Justin Fields, which is funny because Bagent was Fields' backup just 2 years ago. But Bagent, I think a lot of upside. I think he's really mobile, and I think you can get 2 quarterbacks that have similar tendencies. You hope if you're the Jets that can be something to really kickstart your offense. If not, then you jump into the 2026 draft and you hope you can find somebody there for whoever ends up being the Jets' new head coach. Maybe it's Aaron Glenn. And then finally, we're going to wrap things up with the Tennessee Titans.
The Tennessee Titans are the team that's, in my scenario, said no to drafting a quarterback at 1. And so, I started with a player here that Andrew had a player here, and I kind of borrowed him over into my scenario. So I'm going to give Andrew the credit. I started with Andy Dalton. And this is a player that I feel like if you're the Titans and you say our goal really isn't to win in 2025, we're rebuilding the culture, we're planning on drafting a quarterback next year because we think that the class is better. We think that we're going to be drafting high enough to do so. Andy Dalton can kind of be that late career, give you a season to kind of get through that. But Andrew has another name that I found more interesting after putting that in, and that's Mac Jones. I feel like Mac Jones maybe does the same thing that Andy Dalton does, and maybe if you get lucky, maybe he gives you a little bit more, and maybe someone you could even trade down the line if he performs.
Yeah, I loved Mac Jones as a potential really good fit in that Callahan offense, a timing, a rhythm passer. Now he has that second chance. He doesn't have the draft pedigree pressure on him. I think he could be pretty successful in Tennessee, but I also had them drafting Shedeur Sanders. So maybe Mac Jones is a bridge quarterback. Maybe the pressure is too much to start Shedeur right away. I don't know, but Mac can be a really good mentor for Shedeur to help navigate that first round quarterback stress and pressure. As well, and really help him to understand that offense. I think both could be really good fits in Tennessee as well. So that gets us through our matchmaking and a really fun discussion on quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's going to be really fascinating. I did not realize how many dominoes that were set to fall this offseason until we really got into this. And as always, the NFL is going to be full of drama. We're going to find out where all these guys go, how they help their teams, and things like Sam Darnold ending up with the Vikings last year. They have serious ripple effects into real playoff football. So it's going to be fun what happens. So stay tuned, watch where these guys go. It's going to be so much fun. But thanks for joining us for this conversation. Make sure you like and subscribe to the show. But from the draft room to the gridiron, the Draft Fellows have got you covered. Until next time, stay tuned and stay in the game.
Kyle got the insight, Andrew brings the heat. Breaking down the roster every single week. Catch us on the podcast, we coming through your speakers. Top picks for practice squad, we got the seekers. Team dynamics, contracts, and the trades. From the draft day excitement to the accolades. Draft fellows on the track, we gone strong. Analyze the plays, we can't be wrong. From the 40-yard dash to the longest throw. We talking pro